Bobby is a recurring character who was a mobster in Uncle Junior's crew, being upped as a matter of circumstance, running Junior's loan sharking business and becoming Junior's carer when he is under house arrest and his health deteriorates. Bobby's wife dies in an accident, leaving behind 2 children, after which Bobby marries Tony's sister Janice, an opportunist who nonetheless manages to coach Bobby out of his depression. Bobby's stature in the family rises with his marrying into the boss's family. An incident at the lake house that could have proved fatal for Bobby ends up working in his favour, and eventually this man, who starts off as a bumbling fat buffoon, shy and oafish, becomes a key man within Tony's inner circle and the underboss of the Sopranos crew, third in line only behind Tony and Silvio. That could potentially mean if Tony is killed, seeing as though Silvio is proven unfit to be boss, this calzone with legs could legitimately have become the new boss of the family. How do you like them apples? But of course, mistakenly thinking the New York-New Jersey war is over, Bobby goes to a toy store out in the open and is ambushed and killed by New York goons. Bobby is portrayed as a gentle giant with a soft-spoken demeanour, in contrast to many of the other characters in the show who are more aggressive and volatile. There's a childlike quality about him, something that never truly leaves him in spite of his evolution over the course of the show. Much like how Christopher wears a cap in the car with Tony in his first scene and then again in his last scene before his death, and this is used to symbolise Chris's lack of arc and growth, Bobby is known to have a hobby for building and playing with toy trains, and he of course dies in a children's train store, perhaps implying that Bobby was always a child at heart, not made for the mafia life. He's depicted as a loyal and dedicated member of the Sopranos crew, known for his reliability and level-headedness, which comes as a surprise given he starts off as someone who is universally considered a buffoon. And not just a buffoon, but an actively weak man. He's a made guy, and yet he's never popped his cherry.
They make anybody and everybody over there.
And it's implied he rode off the reputation of his father, Old Man Bacala the Terminator, then rode off the relationship with Junior, and then with Tony himself.
I'll tell you this, Bobby. You can't hide behind this brother-in-law shit forever. You're an okay guy, but each and every man is judged on his own merit.
But Bacala is far from a simple-minded mental midget. In fact, he is one of the strongest characters in the show, not least because he had to go through the trauma of his wife's death. Tony makes his sick old father perform a hit which kills him, he is manipulated by Janice into a relationship, he is used and abused by Tony, Junior and the rest of the guys, and he is forced to do a hit by Tony because the man wants to drag him down to his level and punish him for beating him in a fight. Today, let's do a deep dive into the man's character. Let me know who you'd like to see analysed next in the comment section below, and be sure to let me know what you think of Bobby Bacala. I appreciate your thoughts. Bacala's first appearance is from the aftermath of Tony and Junior's war in Season 2. Tony tells Junior to get Bobby out of hiding as he wants to use him as a runner, and the only reason Bobby's even alive is because Tony doesn't think he's important or effective enough to take out. According to Puss, Bacala's always been a lazy bastard, and his first appearance doesn't suggest otherwise. His belly arrives in the room 3 minutes before he does. He looks like a loser, awkwardly shuffling around and looking at the floor over his bumbling stomach. Boy, is he fat! Interestingly, Steve Schirripa was wearing a fat suit in the earlier seasons, but the Sopranos creator David Chase must have considered him fat enough on his own later on, as Schirripa was told he didn't need to wear a fat suit in the later seasons. Anyway, Bacala's first appearance is nothing to write home about. It's like a roast session, but a hint of the man's potential is there. You have to understand, he could easily be walking into his death here for all he knows. One wrong look and he could be taken out. And yet we get a taste of Bacala's potential as a mobster when he says,
I don't think you got reason to talk to me this way.
The balls to say this to the new boss when your entire crew has been taken out and you're surrounded by your opponent's heavies. Bacala really did stand his ground and handled the situation well. Right up until the last line anyway.
To the victor belongs the spoils.
Which probably sounded a lot more impressive in his head than when he said it. There's things that he says behind Tony's back too, the insensitive cocksucker moment for instance, that suggests there's a lot more fire in this guy than is first apparent. What, you telling me you never pondered that? Bobby, I argue, is actually the strong silent type that Tony feels isn't around anymore. Sure, he has his moment and was emotional at times, but Bacala was kept on the sidelines for a long time and needed a mentor. He needed guidance and experience to grow in the mob, to develop, something he got working directly under Junior, and once he was no longer required to be Junior's exclusive carer, that's when he started to prove his worth. Other characters, and by extension the audience, don't notice his competence because, like Silvio, there's no drama about Bobby. He's just a guy who was Junior's carer, and that's all we make of him initially. But he's as gangster as any of them, just a quiet one who wants to be left alone with his family, his trains, and his White Castles. And he's practically never screwed up. He took part in the beating of the protesters in season 2, he threatens the union rep with ease. His only real screw up on the job was when he got jumped. The eye patch situation, whatever happened there. But that could happen to anyone. I mean, the guy waited 40 minutes in line for stool softener. That takes real dedication. This kind of mischaracterization of Bobby from fans who often see the man as a cuddly sweet teddy bear frustrated me, and is actually what prompted me to make my video Why You're Wrong About Bobby Bacala, where I argued he was not a good guy at all, that his soft demeanor makes you forget what he really is. And I don't want to go over the same points in this video, but let me just run down some actions that proves Bobby was just as much of a gangster as anyone. Think on this, Burger Boys. A union leader who is standing up for his workers and trying to stop them getting ripped off is threatened with death by Bobby. Bobby ran a book, cracked skulls at a work stoppage, and ran a hit which resulted in the death of 2 innocent civilians. Remember, it was he who ran the Phil Leotardo botched hit. He has an incredibly comfortable role in the mob and yet goes to Tony asking for more jobs. And even Tony says being off the streets is a good thing these days. But in simple terms, what Bobby is asking for is more opportunities to go out and take money from vulnerable people. Bobby's father didn't want the life for him, and in the early days he clearly wasn't made for it, so we can't give him a pass and say he was born into it, which is an excuse Tony likes to use for himself. It applies even less so for Bacala, who could have lived a life adjacent to the mob instead of in it. When he's promoted in season 4, he tells Tony right to his face he thinks it should have happened sooner. He tells Junior nonchalantly that we'll go after a juror to make him feel better, a small offhand comment that has very dark implications. He ran a scam selling expired osteoporosis medicine. He pushes Tony to get him to tell Hesh to get fucked for his 200k, which, as well as being cruel, is straight up bad advice. Bobby skims off a garbage asbestos dump that uses imported workers to handle it unsafely, something which has shown to lead to painful deaths, and his only concern is his envelope. Yes, he was manipulated by Janice, but he shouldn't have been that dumb, and I doubt that the thought of getting closer to the boss's family didn't flash across his mind at some point. And of course, the murder of a young, innocent civilian who was trying to get custody of his child. Bobby even had a photo of the man with his family, and now that child is without a father. Oh sure, Bobby cried when he did it, and he hugged his daughter afterwards. Well, tell that to the boy's father, I'm sure he'll feel better. And didn't Bobby say he wanted more responsibility? Well, this is increased responsibility. Silvio killed Adriana, Chrissy took out the cop, Tony killed the rat, Pussy was taken out by his friends. This is the job. Don't ask for more responsibility and then cry when you get it, regardless of what Tony's intention was to give Bacala this hit. Bobby is an evil mobster. That is the state in which he left this world. The flip side to his evilness is that what makes him morally bad is what makes him an effective gangster. And when he was a comparatively decent guy in the early seasons, he was a poor mobster. The better you are in the mob, the more of your soul you lose. But Bobby always had the goods, always had the potential, and as his standing in the crew rose, that allowed him to change the way he reacts to things within his mob circle, to no longer be considered a goof. He laughs at Chris with the crew when Paulie roasts him in the Bing. He smirks when Chris is complaining to Tony about Paulie. Old Bobby didn't have the station to do such things, he wouldn't have even wanted to, but by season 6, the power dynamics regarding him and the rest of the crew had changed. Bobby's behaviour is relative to his environment. Around the mobsters in early seasons he has that "aw shucks" attitude, but the way we see him with the union worker is how Bobby would be like with civilians. Later, when he rises in the ranks, he doesn't need to swallow insults from other gangsters, and instead squares up to them. The rise of Bobby Bacala is so drastic, even other characters notice it.
Plus Silvio Dante, and we think Bobby Baccalieri.
That Mortadel's number 3. He used to be Junior Soprano's driver.
I'm his brother-in-law.
You think New York is really gonna come after you, Bobby?
Or Chris watching Bobby and Tony talk business at the barbecue, or the annoyed look Chris shoots Bobby when he comes in to complain. Paulie saying,
"Watch your fat fucking mouth,"
may have been him projecting frustration at the fact that Bobby has basically leapfrogged him in rank. Even in season 4, Chris is surprised to see Bacala in the mix when Tony tasks him with whacking the cop.
Was that Bobby Baccala?
But Bobby's rise is not without merit, even if it's also a commentary on the dwindling nature of Tony's crew and the lack of loyalty around him. Some might feel it's lazy writing, but the fact is, Bobby wasn't any dumber than any of the other guys and had terrific opportunities to grow. The Quasimodo comment is no worse than Carmine Sr. saying there's no stigmata these days, or Tony saying he could technically have not made penisary contact with her Volvo. Plus, I heard that the Quasimodo line was originally written for Paulie, but the actor had a reduced role at the time due to injury. And that line really does feel like something more in line with what Paulie would say, as an avid listener of Sun Tzu audiobooks. Bobby lived in the world of the mob. His old man was in it. He spent years with Junior, gaining knowledge every day, observing, listening, learning.
Pay attention, you just may learn something here.
He's present when the legend Feech has returned from the can, when Richie tries to turn Junior against Tony and Junior mules it over. He's almost always there when Tony and Junior talk business. He probably had the best opportunity of anyone in the show, being in the room when bosses are making decisions but not having to get his hands very dirty, and nothing much to focus on aside from picking up Junior's hemorrhoid cream. And he might never chip in because that's his personality. He's shy.
Shyness is a curse.
And in this case, it's a blessing because the ones who do say things at the wrong moments are guys like Jackie Jr. and Chrissy.
I don't want to say nothing, Tony.
You don't want to get yourself in trouble.
Better to keep your mouth shut and let everybody think you might be stupid than to open your mouth and confirm it.